Bonjour, comment ça va? Hope everyone's doing well this morning. This is a companion video to go along with a French version that I did. I'm doing some videos that's going to talk a little bit about the inspirations behind the French poetry that I've written. And I did one video on my first book, and this is going to be a companion to that. I don't mean it to be an exact translation, so we're going to maybe talk about some different poems and different inspirations, but it's meant to be a companion piece, one in French, one in English. Again, just for those who are unfamiliar, and you can find the information also on my YouTube channel, I have 3 books of French poetry published. You can find them all on the website for Les Éditions Tintamarre, which is published in Shreveport here in Louisiana. Petite Communion and Cherchez la Chasse-Femme, my newest ones. And my first one, which I'm going to talk about today, which is called L'école Gombo. And we're going to talk about that one today. So I want to talk a little bit about the inspirations behind the writings of the poems and the collections of books. And as I mentioned in the French version of here, this book came together. This book came together. It was a manuscript of the first poems I started writing. I started writing poetry, inspired probably from the beginning by my friend, my cousin, David Chermy, from after he put out a book, and we had a lancement, a little celebration of that book, Les Amers, and I started writing poetry. And I started writing poetry for French Louisianians, for Cajuns, for Creoles, for us. I wanted to write primarily in Louisiana French. I wanted to have kind of a quality which is very important to be heard, that they sound really well read out loud for the vast majority of these French Louisianians who never had the chance to learn how to really read and write French really well. And you know, as David says, we can learn poetry, how to write poetry by simply writing poetry. So that's why it's called L'École Gombo, Gombo School. So it has that idea in it as well. L'école, because I'm at l'école, school, because I'm a school teacher, and the book's kind of organized in that fashion. So when I first put the book together as a manuscript, I put it together. I looked at all the poems I'd written, I wrote some new ones, and I put it together in a fashion that followed kind of the school year. And you'll see that as well in there in the book. And so that's why I had the school as well. Being a school teacher, it's very much an integral part of my life. And gombo, we'll talk about the term, and it's pronounced gombo in Francais, gombo. Gombo is the word for 2 things. It's the word for that dish, that famous dish we eat, which can be made in different ways in Louisiana French. But it's also the word for the okra plant. That's why you see the plant of the okra there. Picture taken and cover done by my good friend Scott Long. I think it was one of his own okras in his garden. So that's the idea for L'école Gombo. Now, Gombo, there's a poem in here called French Kiss. And in the poem French Kiss, you hear the idea of comparing the gumbo pot with the melting pot. I believe more in the gumbo pot than the melting pot. In our country, the melting pot wants everybody to be the same. I don't want everybody to be the same. I don't believe everybody should be the same. I don't believe we're all the same. But we do have things in common. And I think we're better many times when we're together. And that's the idea of the gumbo pot, that when you eat a gumbo, you can still taste a piece of chicken, you can still taste the sausage, but it tastes better because it's been together, mixed with the other ones. And that's kind of like the idea of the culture in Louisiana. Our Louisiana culture is a gumbo, in the sense that we all taste better. We're better for being next to each other and being influenced by each other. But yet we still preserve the roots, we still preserve who we are. And that's some of the ideas. So, in the previous video, I discussed some of the poems. I discussed the ideas of how the first poem was inspired by my students, and the first poem was also inspired by a poem by Jean Arsenault, Barry Oncelet, where he describes "I will not speak French on the school grounds," where Louisianians were punished for years for speaking French, and I do a response to that. Je vais parler français, on va parler français, or I will respond to that. I will speak French, and I talk about different things associated with that. The second poem is inspired by our camp we have in Grand Isle called Le Rêve à l'eau, or we did have, and all the wonderful experiences of both celebrating with my family, celebrating with teachers from around the world, French teachers, and with my students. I bring my students to the camp as well. And also the idea of how how water is an integral part. Going to the sea, going to the beach is a wonderful experience for our soul. Qui se connaît, a poem I talked about in the other video as well, inspired by a presentation I did try to explain what a Cajun is in Grand Pré in Nova Scotia. Some of the other poems I wanted to talk about in here, just to let you know, that I didn't mention in the other video, so that's why I wanted to be a little bit of a companion video. So one I'd like to talk to a little bit right here is this poem called Se trouver sur la lettre A dans le dictionnaire, and that one was I wanted to talk about the definition of a friend, and so I wrote it as what a friend is, and it's just a big thing. So it's written like a definition in a dictionary. There's one called a répondeur, and that was actually a répondeur as an answering machine. That was actually my message on my answering machine, my voicemail for a while. I did it during the International Month of Poetry. We did that. There are poems dedicated to different people. My wife, my daughter. Ora Morgan is to my daughter. Un or une is to my wife. Poems about my mother, like Brune, or poems about my father, like Ma vie d'un tigre. Poems dedicated to my grandparents. There's a poem that I wrote at Grand Pré about the experience of what it means, the idea of what the deportation and who I am today. There's a couple of poems like J'aimerais me présenter, where I speak a little bit about the Louisiana French spoken in South Lafourche Parish, where instead of we pronounce the j with a h sound, so you're J'aimerais me présenter rather than J'aimerais me présenter. It's like J'aimerais, the j becomes the h. There's poems like May Day, which is written, for on May the 1st. I wrote the poem on May Day, and it talks about the play on the words of the concept of both May Day, of both where the French term "viens m'aider," come help me, and this idea of where we need help. There's poems written in very low times, like Nuit sombre de l'âme, which was the dark night of the soul. There's poems written in other happier times, where you're celebrating. Poems like, for example, Acadie en fête was a celebration of the Acadians. Héritage culturel, a celebrate of all the cultures, specifically African American and Louisiana French cultures, but all cultures in general. Poems written about the school experience, about rituals that happen once after another. So lots of really great things. Gombo Pool for the Soul song, a poem written about Christmas. So a lot of good different themes that came about in this book, and you kind of put them all together, and you made a first manuscript. I think your first manuscript is not, I think, when you're just putting it together with things you already wrote, that was my experience. And then I tried to find common themes to put them all together. So almost everything I wrote at that point was put in the book. The book did receive lots of positive reviews. Many people still think it's their favorite. It did win an award, Le Monde Francophone, Le Prix Monde Francophone. And it's also got a CD accompanying it with me reading the majority of the poems. So if you'd like to learn more about this book and other books that I've written, stay tuned to my YouTube channel. And thank you for tuning in. Again, those of you who can support us, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And also, if you can support through a donation, we would appreciate it as well. And I'll continue to make more videos and eventually get some better equipment too. So I can make some even better videos. All right, mes amis, merci beaucoup. And until the next time, Kirby Jambon ici. Soignez vous autres, soignez les autres. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Au revoir.